Good day. This is Siren Buddha Medicine, Regina's Rabbit Hole, and we're still looking at angels and angles and archons and demons. Perception. Two sides of a pole. Where there's light, there's shadow. We're looking at the different aspects of spirit, of thought forms. Now, earlier, I had showed a movie called Fallen. I put in some links. They're on my Facebook. If you haven't seen them or seen the movie Fallen, look it up. It's a really good movie. Checking out the disclosure that happens in some movies. More often now than not. And more often now that I'm actually looking than not. Right? So, we saw a movie with Denzel Washington where there's this, they call it an angel, Azael. It's actually the dark, the shadow side, the demon. We're going to see in my research that these thought forms, these ideas, these stereotypes have more than one depiction. Like I'm going to show right now with a corresponding synchronicity. That's what I'm showing, the synchronicities between angels and demons. Good day, family. Much love to you and yours. I'm glad you're here. We're going to go through that angel and demon thing again. Thought forms, what are you thinking kind of thing. It's perception. So right now, we were looking at the demon angel Azael, and let's do that. Okay, Azael, one of the principal evil angels who cohabited with mortal women. Azael means who God strengthens according to lore. Azael slept with Nama and spawned Assyrian guardian spirits known as Sedum. Involved in the exorcism of evil spirits, as punishment, Azael is chained in the desert until Judgment Day. In magical lore, he guards hidden treasure and teaches witchcraft that enables men to make the sun, moon, and stars come down from the sky. In Enoch, Azael is named as one of the primary ministering angels with Asa and Uzzah, who live in the seventh highest heavens. In later lore, he is fallen and is punished by having his nose pierced. Azael is sometimes synonymous with Asa in Akkadian lore. He is one of the Miskin, as Maskim, a prince of hell. It says go to Watchers. Azael, Hazael. Hazael and Azael. I did hear in that movie The Fallen with Denzel Washington. Name or epithet of a god or demon. Let's go through that because I wasn't sure what epithet. I may not be saying it exactly right, but I wasn't sure what that was. So what I did was went to my nifty dictionary. It's really nifty. Where are you? Okay. Yeah, right there. Okay. It is right there. Yay! To put on, upon. An objective noun or phrase expressing some characteristic quality of the thing and what it is applied. So like an echo or a shadow or like tofu. Okay? It's going to take on the qualities and the taste of that which the characteristic of. It's like a mirror, right? The quality I strive to. A brilliant appearance, a just man, an accurate description. Okay. Because that word does come up. So they're saying attributes of a god or demon. The name Azael means God strengthens. Let's see, attributes of. He originally may have been a Semitic god of the folks, of the flocks, who became demonized. Azael is associated with the ritual of scapegoating and is an expectation of sin, as described in Leviticus 16. Okay. In the verse 9, God instructs Moses that his brother Aaron shall take 2 goats and sacrifice one to the Lord for the sin, and the second goat for Azael. And it is to the present to present live. He is to present it live to the Lord for atonement, and then sent into the wilderness for Azael. This reference to the wilderness has led to beliefs that Azael was a demon of the desert. The wilderness is described in different ways, like hell, right? Because there's lack of provisions. So that's hell. So here we have the spiraling in words and in meaning. Okay, we have an embedding. Words are alive, and we're getting this stuff secondhand. So when we're looking at them, I always keep in mind that it has deeper meaning. Depending on what your studies have been, will be the deeper meaning that you're able to attribute to these words. Apocalyptic writings emphasize the evil nature of Azael. He is one of the chief sons of God who comes to earth and is corrupted by cohabitation. It says sea watchers. So did it say that he was one of the chief sons of God? We're doing word association and synchronicity. We're paying attention to the commonalities between these different deities that we're going to look at. Okay. Oh, here we go. Sea watchers. And Enoch, he is described as one of the 12 chiefs of the 20 fallen angels. He has 7 serpent heads, 14 faces, and 12 wings. I'm looking for my He brings aggression by teaching men metalworking and how to make swords and shields, and vanity by teaching women how to use jewelry and cosmetics. Sounds like a Jen, like that movie Jen. Be careful what you ask for. He teaches oppression and leads men and women into adultery and reveals divine secrets. Azael's instruction of metals and metalworking was taken by Hellenistic alchemists and evidence of the angelic origin of alchemy. In the Apocalypse of Abraham, Azael is an angel of disgrace, lies, evil, wrath, and trials. And the Lord of Hell, which in astrology I know to be winter, Helos, winter. In the movie it was winter. There was leaves on the ground, there was snow, so it was winter. And in Solomon, I learned that certain demons travel, and through looking at certain materials. Even this book, it shows how certain demons travel in the winds in a certain time of the year. They're like assigned. In Jewish lore, Azazel figures prominently in folk tales along with another fallen angel, Shemiyazai. Azazel refuses to bow to Abraham when he is presented to God, and when he is presented to God and the heavenly hierarchies. Okay, so here we go. Azazel, keep this in mind. Azazel refuses to bow to Adam when he is first presented to God, and the heavenly hierarchies. Now that reminds me of the first Eve, which would tie into the the story about how Eve wouldn't lie under Adam, metaphorically stand under Adam, be beneath him. If they were made equal, she wouldn't be beneath him. Tying into those bits of research. Islamic lore also tells of Azazel refusing to bow down to Adam, and so God casts him out of heaven and changes him into an ibis, Ebolus, and that would be the snake. All these are going to be synonymous and tied in later. Do I have, can you see? Okay. So I know it's backwards probably right now, but when I do it forward in the YouTube, it'll be perfect. Okay, so we want to follow these wings, right? We're going to follow this character. I'm going to follow these wings. This book right here is Sexual Symbolism, the History of Phallic Worship, and this one that I'm using is Angels. They're like dictionaries and encyclopedias. This other one I'm using is called A Dictionary of Symbols. I'm also using an unabridged dictionary over there, and Mama Wata's excellent reference of female goddesses and material. That's all I'm using for this right now. Oh, and some video footage. Probably get to that. Okay, so page 35 of this book talks about the wings. He is said to pervade the world with the motion of his wings, bringing pure light and hence to be called the splendid, the ruling. Praeparous, and self-illuminated. It is to be observed that the word afterwards, the name of a subordinate deity, is here used as a title relating to one of his attributes, the reasons for which I shall endeavor to explain hereafter. Wings are figuratively attributed to him as being the emblems of swiftness and incubation, by the first of which he pervaded matter, and by the second fruitified the egg of chaos. The egg was carried in procession, the celebration of mysteries, in the celebration of mysteries, because as Plutarch says, Plutarch says, it was the material of generation, containing the seeds and germs of life and motion without actually being possessed of either. What? Carrying the seeds, right? Containing the seeds and germs of life and motion without actually possessed of either. That is so, it reminds me of the scene in Dune where you're just moving through space-time, where everything is there but you're not moving, but all the things have to be there. For this reason, it was very proper symbol for chaos, containing the seeds and materials of all things which, however, were barren and useless until the Creator fruitified them by the incubation of his vital spirit and released them from the restraints of inherent matter by the efforts of his divine. From the serpent having the power of casting his skin and apparently renewing his youth, become the symbol of life and vigor, and as such is always made an attendant on the mythological deities presiding over health. It is also observed that animals and serpent kind retained life more penitentiously than others, except the Pelopus, which is sometimes represented upon the Greek medals. Okay. These are some of the symbols, the ancient symbols that they used to worship or wear, meditate on, whatever you want to call it. Check this guy out, though. He said something really that I really enjoyed. Maybe I can find it really quick. No, it wasn't this guy. Anyway, he was saying how people think they're so intelligent and they want a certain amount of respect when it comes to them speaking about their religions and their deities. That, oh, here we go. Here we go. I found it. Yay. Here we go. This is what one of these guys say. Men think they know because they are sure they feel, and are firmly convinced because they're strongly agitated. Hence proceeded that haste and violence with which devout persons of all religions condemn the rights and doctrines of others, and the furious zeal and bigotry with which they maintain their own, while perhaps if both were equally well understood, both would be found to have the same meaning and only to differ in the modes of conveying it. He didn't really agree with how they morphed, although modern Christianity and religious and the Vatican, he even names the Vatican here, didn't agree with the sexual symbols and suppressed them. He didn't agree with the way they were suppressed and demonized, and felt that everybody had the right to practice and worship within their own frame of mind and mentality. That this shouldn't have happened like that. Now, that was his opinion. This is what I wanted to share with Mama Wata has an opinion too. Now, as truthers or researchers and people looking for truth, I have similar feelings. Here we go. Almost daily, the diaspora are subtly cohorted to join in as Americans, to pay homage to some patriotic event or honorable tribute to an American hero or founding father who either enslaved their ancestors, fathered illegitimate children by them, sexually, economically, and politically exploited them, murdered them, passionately hated them, or simply remained completely indifferent to their humanity and unjust plight, as if it were not painful enough on any given day while cruising on the way to work, usually for one of their companies. Many must ride down roads, streets, and highways bearing their names. Many are forced to attend schools named after them and study them and even pledge allegiance to them. Many are forced to proudly articulate their ideas and pledge honor codes and secret oaths bearing their names. Yet if anyone in the diaspora dare pour libation or offer food to acknowledge strength and venerate their own ancestors and deities, a lynch mob of conservative Christians and others are quick to accuse them of idolatry and superstition, some even threatening legislation against their pagan and primitive practices, and they dare not tolerate in a principled and decent democracy. Worse still, the diaspora are poured daily to forget about their past, while being forced to remember and honor the ancestors and past of others. Something is clearly wrong with this schizophrenic picture. We find similar feelings. I find feelings, I know while I'm going through research and stuff like that, looking at how it affected me personally, how it affected groups of people, the programming and the mindset, the perceptions, and we know that these are thought forms, and thought forms come from archons, from light code beings, okay, that words are alive, that there was this book called This Present Darkness that I really enjoyed reading years ago. I would suggest that as a read. It talks about how these thought forms are big enough, large enough to take over vast areas, cities, states, sectors, right? their frame of minds and stuff, and they travel through the air. Look at how we use media. Media is a form of using the airways. We also have computers, and we are a form of computers, and we know that our perception was off with the way that we were looking at things. So that's why I'm looking at the correspondence, found myself looking at the correspondence with these things. Now, we went into the wings. So you see the correspondence with the wings from Azazel and the angel book, right? And he said, now this is being equated to a deity that's like a goat, okay? And that's where I'm going to make the equation to this goat god. And where we're getting that from, the Osiris. Okay, here we go. This book has really been through it. It was an antique book, but it's coming apart, as you can see, at the seams. For instance, the celebrated bronze on the Vatican has the male organs of generation placed upon the head of the cock, and the emblem of the sun supported by the neck and shoulders of man. In this composition, they represented the generative powers of Eros, the Osiris, Mithras, or Bacchus, whose centaur is the sun incarnate with man. By the inscription on the pedestal, the attribute this personified is styled the Savior of the world. The title always venerable under whatever image it is represented. Okay? Now, one second. This is more like this is something like they're talking about, except it's like an abstract depiction of body parts that they use to articulate the attributes of God. Okay, this thing with the neck and the penis and stuff. Now, the Egyptians showed the incarnation of the deity by a less permanent, though equally expressive, symbol. At Mendes, a living goat was kept as the image of the generative power, to whom the women presented themselves naked and had the honor of being publicly enjoyed by him. Herodotus saw the act openly performed and called it prodigy. But the Egyptians had no such horror of it, for it was to them representation of incarnation of the deity and the communication of his creative spiritual spirit of man. Culture is defined by its people. This wasn't evil when they were doing it as a culture, in the same way that they want to legalize having sex with animals right now, and pedophilia. Do you know what I'm saying to you? Thought forms and archons. Thought forms. Thoughts form. You know? Bridges, arches, arcs. They float. The currency. They make money. It's always something that's going to make somebody some money in our culture. Yeah, so apparently the Vatican wasn't having that. It was one of the sacraments that the ancient churches, and was without doubt beheld that the pious awe and reverence with which devout persons always contemplated the mysteries of their faith, whatever they happened to be. For as the learned and orthodox Bishop Warburn, whose authority is not for me to dispute, says, for the nature of anything acting morally cannot arise nor from its effects. Therefore, ought we can tell this ceremony, however shocking it may appear to modern manners and opinions, may have been intrinsically materialous at the time of its celebration. Anyway. In case you need to pause that and read it for yourself. And this is a picture of the depiction of what they used to do to them scapegoats. And I'm going to show you how that ties in. Now remember, it said that it was personified, that the inscription on the pedestal, right, that they had for the Vatican when they had this thing that they used to, this abstract thing that they used to depict this ancient depiction of God, is styled the Savior of the world. Yeah, so right there, we're going to do this. Oh, first we're going to do this. Check out Pan here. Pan. I panned in. Get it? Pan. Wholeness. Pan. Pan around. Okay. The god Pan is a symbol of nature and is usually represented with horns, expressive of the sun's rays and of aggressive force of Aries, and with legs covered with hair, denoting the vitality of base forces, color red, earth, shrubs, and the instincts. Okay, that's green. The astrology, Pan is one aspect of Saturn. So you have the Saturn equation, and is also equated with Saturn and with life, and it's involtive, and in particular its base aspects. This said the cosmic egg, the egg of chaos, right? What did it say about movement without actually moving? Do you remember that part? That was like so juicy to me. Moving without actually moving. Yeah, I did say that that was kind of like reminding me of Dune, the movie Dune, right? Okay, so anyway, I'm not going to find it again. That moving without moving is that space. Okay, there you go again with the equation. There we go again with the equation, with the correspondences. Now we're going to do this. I really like this. This is one of my favorite ones.
#27 of a Book of Myths. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James K. White, Chula Vista. A Book of Myths by Jean Lang. Section 27. Pan. What was he doing, the great god Pan, down in the reeds by the river? Spreading ruin and scattering ban, splashing and paddling with hoofs of a goat, and breaking the golden lilies afloat with the dragonfly on the river. He tore out a reed, the great god Pan, from the deep cool bed of the river. The limpid water turbidly ran, and the broken lilies a-dying lay, and the dragonfly had fled away ere he brought it out of the river. This is the way, laughed the great god Pan, laughed while he sat by the river. The only way, since gods began to make sweet music, they could succeed. Then, dropping his mouth to a hole in the reed, he blew in power by the river. Sweet, 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 O Pan, piercing sweet by the river. Blinding sweet, O great god Pan. The sun on the hill forgot to die, and the lilies revived, and the dragonfly came back to dream on the river. Yet half a beast is the great god Pan, to laugh as he sits by the river, making a poet out of a man. The true gods sigh for the cost and pain, for the reed which grows nevermore again, as a reed with the reeds in the river. E.B. Browning. Were we to take the whole of that immense construction of fable that was once the religion of Greece, and treat it as a vast play in which there were many thousands of actors, we should find that one of these actors appeared again and again, in one scene, then in another, in connection with one character, then with another, unexpectedly slipping out from the shadows of the trees from the first act even to the last. We should see Pan, so young and yet so old, so heedlessly gay, yet so infinitely sad. If, rather, we were to regard the mythology of Greece as a colossal and wonderful piece of music,
The dual nature.
where the thunders of Jupiter and the harsh hoofbeats of the fierce black steeds of Pluto, the king whose coming none can stay, made way for the limpid melodies of Orpheus and the rustling whisper of the footfall of nymphs and of fauns on the leaves, through it all, we should have an ever-recurring motif, the clear, magical fluting of the pipes of Pan. We have the stories of Pan and of Echo, of Pan and of Midas, of Pan and Syrinx, of Pan and Selene, of Pan and Pities, of Pan and Pomona. Pan it was who taught Apollo how to make music. It was Pan who spoke what he deemed to be comfort to the distraught Psyche, Pan who gave Diana her hounds. The other gods had their own special parts in the great play that at one time would have Olympus for stage, at another the earth. Pan was nature incarnate. He was the earth itself. Many are the stories of his genealogy, but the one that is given in one of the Homeric hymns is that Hermes...
1 second. I want to make this equation. In the African spiritual divination system, in the Orishas, two of them, I can't remember off the top of my head which ones, two of them switched their gifts of dancing. One gave their gift of dance to another spirit, and it gave its gift, they switched. Anyway.
the swift-footed young god, wedded Dryopa, the beautiful daughter of a shepherd in Arcadia, and to them was born under the greenwood tree the infant Pan. When Dryopa first looked on her child, she was smitten with horror and fled away from him. The deserted baby roared lustily, and when his father, Hermes, examined him, he found a rosy-cheeked thing with pricked ears and tiny horns that grew amongst his thick curls, and with the dappled furry chest of a fawn, while instead of dimpled baby legs, he had the strong, hairy hind legs of a goat. He was a fearless creature, and merry withal. And when Hermes had wrapped him up in a hareskin, he sped to Olympus and showed his fellow gods the son that had been born to him, and the beautiful nymph of the forest. Baby though he was, Pan made the Olympians laugh. He had only made a woman, his own mother, cry. All others rejoiced at the new creature that had come to increase their merriment. And Bacchus, who loved him most of all, and felt that here was a babe after his own heart, bestowed on him the name by which he was forever known, Pan, meaning all.
This is weird because you know that we have an alternative Earth history, and I'm just thinking about Jesus born in a manger, but it turns out that this depiction of Jesus as Pan actually has goat legs, and yeah,
All.
Pan
Thus,
means all.
Pan grew up, the earthly equal of the Olympians. And as he grew, he took to himself the lordship of woods and of solitary places. He was king of huntsmen and of fishermen, lord of flocks and herds, and of all the wild creatures of the forest. All living, soulless things owned him their master. Even the wild bees claimed him as their overlord. He was ever merry, and when a riot of music and of laughter slew the stillness of the shadowy woods, it was Pan who led the dancing throng of white-limbed nymphs and gambling satyrs, for whom...
Okay, Pan can also be tied in with the god, Egyptian god Hapi, from the Nile. And we're looking at correspondences. And we know that our ancient deities and stories and stuff were hijacked by this culture. So it does feel very strange breaking out of the indoctrination and the mind programming, listening to, you know, our childhood mentors and, you know, icons and stories be ripped apart, you know, when I'm doing the research and placed back together again in a different way, if I allow it, but in a way that makes more sense, in a way that brings more peace and understanding to me. It also allows me to explore more of our past through scientific and spiritual insights. I'm really glad to have found this information and seen it for myself.
whom he made melody from the pipes, for whose creation a maid had perished. Round his horns and thick curls he presently came to wear a crown of sharp pine leaves, remembrance of another fair nymph whose destruction he had brought about. Pitys listened to the music of Pan, and followed him even as the children followed the Pied Piper of later story. And ever his playing lured her further on, and into more dangerous and desolate places, until at length she stood on the edge of a high cliff, whose pitiless front rushed sheer down to cruel rocks far below. There Pan's music ceased, and Pitys knew all the joy and the sorrow of the world as the god held out his arms to embrace her. But neither Pan nor Pitys had remembrance of Boreas, the merciless north wind, whose love the nymph had flouted. Ere Pan could touch her, a blast, fierce and strong as death, had seized the nymph's fragile body, and as a wind of March tears from the tree the first white blossom that has dared to brave the ruthless gales, and casts it, torn and dying, to the earth, so did Boreas grip the slender Pitys and dash her life out on the rocks far down below. From her body sprang the pine tree, slender, erect, clinging for dear life to the sides of precipices, and by the prickly wreath he always wore, Pan showed that he held her in fond remembrance. Joy and youth and force and spring was Pan to all the creatures whose overlord he was. Pan meant the richness of the sap in the trees, the lushness of grass, and of the green stems of the blue hyacinths and the golden daffodils, the throbbing of growth in the woodland and in the meadows, the trilling of birds that seek for their mates and find them, the coo of the doves on their nests of young, the arrogant virility of bulls and of stags, whose lowing and belling wake the silence of the hills, the lightness of heart that made the nymphs dance and sing, the fawns leap high and shout aloud for very joy of living.
Kundalini.
All of these things was Pan to those of his own kingdom. Yet to the human men and women who had also listened to his playing, Pan did not mean only joyousness. He was to them a force that many times became a terror because of its sheer irresistibleness. While the sun shone and the herdsmen could see the nodding white cotton grass, the asphodel, and the golden king cups that hid the black death traps of the pitiless marshes,
Okay.
they had no fear.
Hoping also show that, Pan is also androgynous as it morphs and lines up with the bafflement. And in the movie The Fallen, there's a part where Aziel is in this woman, and he says, "Don't you know, Hobbs, that, when he's moving from body to body, no man can resist him." And I said to my daughter, because we were watching together, "Yeah, it's a woman." She said, "Yeah, the spirit, the demon is a woman. No man," it play on words, "no man can resist me," but it's androgynous, okay? An androgynous demon. So that play on words.
Nor in the daytime, when in the woods the sunbeams played amongst the trees, and the birds sang of spring and of love, and the syrinx sent an echo from far away that made the little silver birches give a whispering laugh of gladness, and the pines cease to sigh, did man or maid have any fear. Yet when darkness fell on the land, terror would come with it, and deep in their hearts they would know that the terror was Pan. Blindly, madly, they would flee from something that they could not see, something they could barely hear, and many times rush to their own destruction. And there would be no sweet sound of music then, only mocking laughter. Panic was the name given to this fear, the name by which it is still known. And to this day, panic yet comes, and not only by night, but only in very lonely places. There are those who have known it, and for shame have scarce dared to own it. In highland glens, in the loneliness of an island in the western sea, in a green valley amongst the solemn, kindly, round-backed hills of the Scottish border, in the remoteness of the Australian bush. They have no reasons to give, or their reasons are far-fetched. Only to them, as to Mowgli, fear came, and the fear seemed to them to come from a malignant something from which they must make all haste to flee, did they value safety of mind and of body. Was it for this reason that the Roman legionnaires on the Great Wall so often reared altars in that lonely land of moor and mountain, where so many of them fought and died? To Pan and to the sylvan deities? For surely Pan was there, where the curlew cried and the pewit mourned, and sometimes the waiting soldiers must almost have imagined his mocking laughter born in the winds that swept across the bleak hills of their exiled solitude. He who was surely one of the bravest of mankind, one who always, in his own words, clung to his paddle, writes of such a fear when he escaped death by drowning from the wise and fled. The devouring element in the universe had leaped out against me in this green valley quickened by a running stream. The bells were all very pretty in their way, but I had heard some of the hollow notes of Pan's music. Would the wicked river drag me down by the heels? Indeed. And look so beautiful all the time?
I'm going to fast forward here.
Nature's good humor was only skin soul, the human body. United, yet ever in conflict, that is Pan. The sighing and longing for things that must endure everlastingly, the riotous enjoyment of the beauty of life, the perfect appreciation of the things that are. Life is so real, so strong, so full of joyousness and of beauty. And on the other side of a dark stream, cold, menacing, cruel, stands death. Yet life and death make up the sum of existence. And until we, who live our paltry little lives here on earth in the hope of a beyond, can realize what is the true air that is played on those pipes of Pan, there is no hope for us of even a vague comprehension of the illimitable immortality.
What?
It is a very old tale that tells us of the passing of Pan. In the reign of Tiberius, on that day when, on the hill of Calvary at Jerusalem in Syria, Jesus Christ died as a malefactor on the cross. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was a darkness all over the earth. Thamus, an Egyptian pilot, was guiding a ship near the islands of Paxae in the Ionian Sea. And to him came a great voice saying, "Go, make everywhere the proclamation, 'Great Pan is dead.'" And from the poop of his ship, when in great heaviness of heart, because for him the joy of the world seemed to have passed away, Thamus had reached Pallades, he shouted aloud the words that he had been told. Then from all the earth there arose a sound of great lamentation, and the sea and the trees, the hills, and all the creatures of Pan sighed in sobbing unison, an echo of the pilot's words, "Pan is dead. Pan is dead." The lonely mountains o'er, and the resounding shore, a voice of weeping heard, and loud lament. From haunted spring and dale, edged with poplar pale, the parting genius is with sighing sent. With flower and woven tresses torn, the nymphs in twilight shade of tangled thickets mourn. Milton. Pan was dead, and the gods died with him. Gods of Hellas, gods of Hellas, can ye listen in your silence? Can your mystic voices tell us where ye hide? In floating islands, with a wind that evermore keeps you out of sight of shore? Pan, Pan is dead. Gods, we vainly do adjure you. Ye return nor voice nor sign. Not a votary could secure you even a grave for your divine. Not a grave to show thereby, here these gray old gods do lie. Pan, Pan is dead. E.B. Browning. Pan is dead. In the old Hellenistic sense, Pan is gone forever. Yet until nature has ceased to be, the thing we call Pan must remain a living entity. Some there be who call his music, when he makes all humanity dance to his piping, joie de vie. And de Musset speaks of le vin de la jeunesse, which ferments dans le vin de Dieu. It is Pan who inspires Seamus, the old islander, of whom Fiona MacLeod writes, and who, looking towards the sea at sunrise, says, "Every morning like this, I take my hat off to the beauty of the world." Half of the flesh and half of the spirit is Pan. There are some who have never come into contact with him, who know him only as the emblem of paganism, a cruel thing, more beast than man, trampling with goat's feet on the gentlest flowers of spring. They know not the meaning of the green fire of life, nor have they ever known Pan's moods of tender sadness. Never to them has come in the forest, where the great gray trunks of the beeches rise from a carpet of primroses and blue hyacinths, and the slender silver beeches are the guardian angels of the starry wood anemones, and the sunbeams slant through the oak and beech leaves of tender green and play on the dead amber leaves of a year that is gone, the whisper of little feet that cannot be seen, the piercing sweet music from very far away that fills the heart with gladness and yet with a strange pain, the ache of the Weltschmerz, the echo of the pipes of Pan. Oftenest in the dark woods, I hear him sing dim, half-remembered things, where the old mosses cling to the old trees, and the faint wandering eddies bring the phantom echoes of a phantom spring. Fiona MacLeod. End of Pan. Recording by James K. White, Chula Vista.
Okay. That was definitely necessary. There was so many equations in that one. There's a lot of different stories about Pan on the YouTube, but I really like that one. I'm gonna play some of my own jazz for a minute. Okay. So Pan is the goat. He's associated with the goat. He's associated with make the connection between this Albaros. The symbol appears principally amongst the Gnostics and is depicted as a dragon, snake, or serpent biting its own tail. In the broadest sense, it is symbolic of time and of the continuity of life. It sometimes bears the caption, Hen to Pan, the one, the all, as in the Codex. Hen to Pan. Let me finish reading this one. Hen to Pan, the one, the all. That we just got finished listening to that where Pan was associated with the all. As in the Codex of Marcinus, for instance, in the 2nd century AD, it has also been explained as in a union between the Catherine principle as represented by the serpent and the celestial principle as signified by the bird, a synthesis which can also be applied to the dragon. Ruland contends that this proves that it is a variant of the symbol of mercy, the duplex god. In some versions, remember I said there's more than one aspect. We've been looking at one aspect. There's more than one aspect to these spirits, and they hijacked what they understood and what they wanted to use and left the rest as if it was going to disappear, but energy never dies. It only transfers, and right now stuff is waking up and being shaken up, and so here we are. A synthesis which can also be applied to the dragon. Ruland contends that this proves that it is a variant of the symbol of mercy, the duplex god. In some versions of the Ouroboros, the body is half light and half dark, alluring in this way to the successive counterbalancing of opposing principles as illustrated in the Chinese yin-yang symbol, for instance. What? Avola asserts that it represents the dissolution of the body or the universal serpent, which, to no quote of Gnostic saying, passes through all symbols of the undifferentiated, of the unchanging law, which moves through all things, linking them by common bond. Both the dragon and the bull are symbolic. Okay? Of the solar hero. The arborist biting its own tail is symbolic of self-purification. I was reading and hear about how they were talking about fertility. You gotta excuse me 1 second. Yeah, so we're talking about fertility and the cosmic egg. The egg of, well, actually the egg of chaos. But we're speaking of duality, and that this is a being equated with a God of all, and that there's more than one aspect of it, obviously. It's equated with winter and also with spring, with fertility, but also with death. Good day, beloved. I just want to say thank you for joining me. I hope you're enjoying this lesson. So Evola asserts that it represents the dissolution of the body or the universal serpent, which, to quote the Gnostic saying, passes through all things. Poison, the viper, and the universal solvent are all symbols of the undifferentiated, of the unchanging law, which moves through all things, linking them by a common bond. Both the dragon and the bull are symbolic anti-Gnostics of the solar hero. The arborist biting its own tail is symbolic of self-purification. Read all this. Or the primitive idea of self-sufficient nature, a nature that is, which Allah Nietzsche. Ooh, look at that word there. Nietzsche continually returns, which within a cyclic pattern its own beginning. Continually returns within a cyclic pattern to its own beginning. There, the Vietnam manuscript on alchemy, which depicts the arborist, which its body half black, symbolizing earth and night, and half white, denoting heaven and light. The snake that eats itself. Okay? So here you have Pan being associated with the snake and the bird. Okay? And remember, I started out with Isaiah and the wings, okay? And the association with the goat, okay? And the snake, the ibis. Alrighty? Here we go. This song is called Taurus. I really like this song. Okay, so Pan has been associated with the bull. We got the bull right here. The bull is associated with the symbolism of Taurus. It is a highly complex symbol, both for the historical and psychological point of view. The esoteric tradition is the emblem used by Hyperboreans as a totem against the dragon of the Negroes and equated to the god of Thor, this son of heaven and woodland. The principle of emblematic use symbolizes the superiority of mammal over reptile, or of the Aryan over Negro. The basic dilemma lies between the integration of the bull as a symbol of earth, of the mother, and of the wetness principle, the cosmic waters, and the view that it represents heaven and the Father. Remember, Pan is whole. You have this wetness, right? That's the female principle. So it's got male and female principles. Mithric ritual seems to have been founded on the former, the sacrifice of the bull. Okay? And this is important. All these symbolism and stuff being done around us. We're about to get into that right now. They say in Africa, and when they kill the Sudans, there's stories that I heard where they say they came up to us and they killed the whole village and they told us that our God was dead. You know, they like saying that your God is dead, you know, in literature and, you know, in real life when you hear back, you know, that's also a common theme. Your God is dead. But what did that liver box thing say in regards to Pan? That as long as nature lives, God can't be dead. Our Creator cannot be dead because it's the author and finisher of all existence. It's not the same thing as a God. It's all things. This was a representative of all things. You know what I'm saying? Okay. The bull was expressive of the penetration of the female principle by the masculine of the human of the inferious, IGNIFEROUS, inferious, the rays of the sun, the origin, the cause of findicity. I'm putting a C in there. Nudity. That's the FECUNDITY. Crepe investigation these paradoxes has founded to the fact that the bull is the commonest tame animal of the Near East, and relates this to the fact that the bulls are depicted as lunar as often as solar. That is, that they may be subject to either one or the other or opposed principles we have just outlined. Sin was Mesopotamian lunar god, and he often took the form of a bull. Sin. What are the 7 deadly sins? Sin is associated with the bull, who's associated with Pan, who's associated with Jesus, who's associated with the dark side, which is like Azazel. Okay? The lunar bull becomes solar when the solar cult supplants the more ancient cult of the moon. I gotta watch the way I'm looking now. My eyes are getting a bit tired. But it may well be that the bull is first and foremost a lunar symbol because it is equated with the moon metaphorically by virtue of the resemblance of the horns of the crescent moon, while it must take second place to the solar symbol of the lion. This is the view expressed by Ellendale, for example, who suggests that the bull does not represent any of the astral bodies, but rather the fendating sky, and that from the astral bodies, but rather from the fendating sky, that from the year 24 BC onward, both the bull and the thunderbolt were symbols connected with the aspheric deities, the bull bellow being associated with the rolling thunder. Okay? According to Forbinus, the black bull is linked with the lower heaven, that is, with death. This belief prevailed in India and in lands remote as Java, Bali, which fell under the influences of Indian culture. It was the custom to burn bodies of the princes and coffins shaped like bulls. There are Egyptian paintings of black bull bearing the corpse of Osiris on the back. So we have ritual association with these symbolic depictions of God. Okay? I'm going to move on and go back here. Now we heard Osiris, right? And the night sky and the sky. So we have ether, we have air. And the ancient theology, we're back here again. In ancient theology, Greece preserved the Orphic fragments of the deity. The Eros, or first begotten love, is said to have been produced together with ether by time or eternity. Dialectic, my brain is flipping back and forth between all these different theologies and stuff. White and dark light, okay? Magnetic and dialectic light. Dialectic is dark light, magnetic is the white light. That's the male and female energy. Then you have the red and the blue. The magnetic is the blue, and the dialectic would be the red, okay? You get into the yin and yang symbols, it's bringing them together here with ether and time, Chronos and Rhea, okay? Operating on the inherent matter, he is described as eternity begetting the father of night, called in later times the lucid or the splendid, the dreaming world, the shadow world, the mirror world, the other world, right? Because he first appeared in splendor of the double nature, as posing the general power of creation, as possessing the general power of creation. Pan and generation. Pan, the bull, the stud, both active and passive. Both active and passive. He was the bull, the stud, and the female principle, the waters, right? It was androgynous. So here we go. Plutarch tells us that the Egyptians represented Osiris with the organ of generation erect to show his generative and prolific power. He also tells us that Osiris was the same deity as Bacchus of the Greek mythology, who was also the same as the begotten love, as the first begotten love. This deity is celebrated by the ancient poets as creator. I was just thinking Blake. Of all things, the Father of God to men, and appears, what of all things, the Father of gods to men, and appears by the passage above referred to, that the organ of generation was a symbol of his great characteristic attribute. Not something that they were ashamed of, being able to procreate if you were still attached to the extraterrestrial Earth history, and you know they didn't want us procreating and had total control over the gene pool, and that there was interference if this is following the fallen angels, the fallen archons, those thought forms. Some of them get a body and some of them don't. Some of them only get to possess man, to live through man, to experience life through men and women. The organ of generation represented the generative or creative attribute, and in the language of a painting and sculpture, signified the same as the epithet. That's the likeness, and the Orphic Leninese. Those are some writings, I suppose, about the poems and love stories and stuff that they were singing to Pan, or this goat-like. It doesn't call it Pan in this book. It's goat. Okay? It's the goat they love so much. Wow. Interesting. But not too interesting. Poor goats. Had no say-so at all. Just run up and grab a freaking goat. Alright. That's some bull. Okay, the cosmic egg. Okay, I already read that one. The bull is associated with the Taurus. Okay, and the Abaris is associated with the Caduceus, the snake. Okay, that's media sign. Medicine, energy, Taurus fields, using your energy, spinning it into Taurus fields, or using to heal your body, okay? The knowledge of medicine, knowledge of words and light code, you know, being able to break down information is an art. in itself. And then what do you do with it, right? So there we go. Mama Wata. Mama Zobi says, the divine African mother was also worshipped as the Holy Virgin, meaning unmarried, self-created goddess who could change her gender at will. It is she who gave birth to all the masculine solar deities, whose celestial symbol was represented by the sun and sometimes by the moon, and whose totemic symbol was represented by the ether, the bull, the lion, the ram, and later the fish. And we know, of course, the snake. What? In West Africa voodoo, the priestess of Mama Wata is called Mamasi, queen of the ship, or literally mother wisdom, which may have been derived from the Egyptian Mamute, meaning bearer or house of the boat. Hieroglyphically, the Egyptian name Mama, which what all senior mamouses in West Africa are called, is associated with the implements of water and is depicted as a double boat stand. So we have the primeval waters. The voodoo deities are minor gods, cosmically represented as forces of nature, and are deified as the dynamic anima of all life on earth. The anima, okay? The anima. Ain't that some crap? Anima, like enema, okay? These words are so funny. Enema, okay? Okay? Life principle, soul. What? Ah. Life principles, soul. So now we're going to talk about the anima, okay? Okay, so under the Dana, okay, Daena, The ancient Iranian religion, the Dana, symbolized the female principle anima of the human spirit, while at the same time identifying it with the sum of the actions, good and bad, that man performs during his life. On the third day after his death, the just man, is greeted on the bridge of the Sinvat by a wondrously beautiful young girl, the Dana, who becomes united with him for eternity, thus reconstructing the principle, the primordial androgen, on a higher plane, as above, so below, as within, so without. The Kabbalah needed to give reality to the principle of the eternal female, and gave the name Shekinah to the female aspect of God. The Shekinah is a complex entity, possibly one of Jehovah's angels or Jehovah himself. What? There's another equation, okay? This is outright. Complex entity, possibly one of Jehovah's angels or Jehovah himself. In every case, it is the loved one referred to in the Song of Solomon. Sahishi, legitimately. No man can resist it, but is related rather to the Holy Spirit of Trinity. He observes the Shekinah is the angel who comes to the aid of those just men who are suffering, above all if they are suffering for love. There you go with the love theme again. All right, where the particular, remember the movie The Fallen, and both of them, there's like a particular angel who's like here for love. They feel like that's the noble feature of the world, not power or the ability to corrupt in one way or the other, God or devil, with that war, but love. The soul is androgynous. And even Jung, I think, wrote about this. Okay, now the anima. Here we go. Back to this. The voodoo are deities, minor gods, cosmologically represented as forces of nature, and are defined as the dynamic anima of all life on earth. We're reading here the same thing, and it's the principles. You get into the word principalities, thought forms, archons. But this bull, right? This bull and this cosmic egg. Now from here, Egyptian hieroglyphs, the determinate sign of the egg represents potentially the seed of generation and the mystery of life. This meaning persisted among the alchemists, who added explicitly the idea that it was the container of matter and for thought. In this way was the transition effected for the concept of the egg to the egg of the world, a cosmic symbol, which can be found in most symbolic traditions. The Chinese believed that the first man was sprung from an egg dropped by Tien, Tien, the Bennu bird, equating it with, from heaven to float upon the primordial waters. The primordial waters. This bull is symbolic of the same thing that Pan and the symbology of Pan is symbolic of and has been equated to. Earthly joy as riches, and the impediment of aquatic joy is softness and repose. Fiery pleasure is desire and love. Airy delight is liberty and movement. Jung stresses that traditional aspects of the elements two are active, fire and air. You learn this in astrology, also in alchemy of the astrology. Fire and air, and two are passive, earth and water. Hence the massive creative character of the first two and the female representative of submissive nature of the second pair. Okay? The fifth element symbolizes, sometimes called ether, sometimes freely designed, designated spirit of the quintessence and the sense of the soul of all things. So it's soul. It's the essence. Okay. So that's the anima, and the connection with that, with source energy, right? So we're going to tie up this. He is said to pervade the world with the motion of his wings, bringing pure light, and hence to be called the splendid, the ruling. Wings are figuratively attributed to him as being the emblems of swiftness and incubation, by the first of which he pervaded matter, and by the second fruitified the egg of chaos. The egg was carried in procession at the celebration of the mysteries because, as Plutarch says, it was the material of generation, containing the seeds of germs of life and the motion without actually being possessed by either. Remember that part? And it was about incubation. And it was also associated with the Savior of man. There was just something so juicy. Where is it? Yes, yes, yes! We've come to the end, the climax of this talk, bringing it all together. This page here. Yes. Eurus, a wild bull, in the act of butting against the egg of chaos and breaking it with his horns. Okay? It is true that the egg is not represented with the bull on any of those which I have seen, but Mr. Handcarvel has brought examples from other countries where the same system prevailed, which, as well as the general analogy of the Greek theology, prove the egg must have been understood. Just like a lot of the symbolism at one time was just understood. Okay? People were taught this. It wasn't segmented like this. It wasn't sciences and spirituality. It was spiritual sciences. Okay? And that the attitude of the bull could have no other meaning. It was a form that this horn symbol of the power of the deity, that the horns were placed and the portraits of the king to show that their power was derived from heaven. And that's where the association was made from. People who still knew about genetic tampering or ancestral history, that there were different kinds of beings on the planet. Sometimes the generative attribute is represented by the symbol of the goat, supposed to be the most salacious of animals. The same principles as the goat and the serpent. Okay? Augustus, the goat terminates the tail of the fish to show the generative power incorporated with water. There you go, the connection with the prenatal waters. Okay? Under his feet is the globe of the earth, supposed to be fertilized by this union, and upon his back the cornucopia, representing the result of fertility. Okay, so that's where all the association is. The egg of chaos. It's crazy. I know. It's really crazy. Jesus, how I love you. How I love you, Jesus. They loved him. You know? Yeah, so a lot of my other research goes into this stuff too. Really deep. I'm glad to have made this connection with Pan and with both the dark and light side. We have a dark side, all of us. I had started saying, right, because I was so afraid at one point years ago of my dark side. And I would say, okay, well, as dark as my dark side is, my light is even bigger, because that's just a shadow. You know what I'm saying? A shadow is a smaller portion of you, or a different aspect of you. Once you're aware of it and make friends with it, can't control you as much. And that's been part of the journey, is admitting and recognizing the shadow, not leaving it out. In the same way that by paying attention actually ignites something and wakes it up, and allows it to work with you instead of against you, or it being so mysterious. Like working with the ancestors and allowing them to speak through me, and figuring out what it is to, what does it take to get into that flow, to get into that space of not just humility, but it's service. I'm proud to serve. I'm honored to serve. So I wouldn't call it humility. Although, see, that's the dark and light side. Sometimes it takes me to humble myself and put other things that don't really serve me anyway. It's a journey. It's an experience. It's erroneous. Anyway, this is Regina's Rabbit Hole. This is Siren Buddha Medicine Talk Therapy, and going through the lessons that I teach myself. Each one teach one. My Casa Sukasa. Much love to you and yours. Ooh, my eyebrow is like no longer where it was. Much love to you and yours. I love you. I love me, your aspects of self. We're just going to keep pushing and moving forward. I'm out.